Everyone, welcome. We'll give everyone a few more minutes to join and then we'll go ahead and get started. And make sure that you're on mute, please.
When the person that you're in progress.
We have 2 more minutes before we start. Make sure that you get some water or do whatever you need to do before we get started.
Yeah, so I did kind of mention it to Sandy, but she was saying that we might not have enough staff or anything. So if anything, I was gonna tell you if you can.
Hey all, please remember to mute yourselves. This is more meeting. You. Before we get started, I think it would be great if everyone could put in the chat, you know, your name, where you work, and your connection to the work. And by work, I mean, if you have a connection or your service provider or anything like that, specifically working with youth experiencing exploitation.
Yes.
All right, it's 1:10, so let's go ahead and get started. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. Welcome to the space. I'm going to quickly introduce myself and allow Kia to introduce herself before diving into today's conversation. And as a reminder, like, this is a pretty heavy topic. You're going to be hearing like some real life, some very personal experience from Kia and I. So we want to make sure that you're all able to care for yourself, however it is that you need to care for yourself during the session. All right, so my name is Maria Contreras. I'm the Program Associate at the National Center for Youth Law, Collaborative Responses to Commercial Sexual Exploitation Initiative. That's always a mouthful to say. And so our team works on a variety of different issues related to, you know, developing guidance in partnership with other people, including Department of Social Services. We're involved in a lot of things CSEC related. I'm also help run the Survivor Advisory Board, and I'm a survivor myself, and I have direct service experience both as an advocate and as a mentor. And the other thing that you should probably know about me is that I was a parent throughout my entire time in the foster care system. And so I think that's important for you all to know as I share some of that experience with you all today. So now I'm gonna go ahead and have Kia introduce herself.
Good afternoon, y'all. So my name is Kia. I am the program director here at Restoration Divergent Services. My role here is to make sure that everything runs smoothly. We are based right here in Compton. A little bit about my expertise and a little bit about my background is I'm a survivor. I'm always a survivor first. And I was also in foster care. I became pregnant in a transition like limbo period in between me being in youth shelters and me going into foster care. That was kind of like the gateway for me to get into foster care. So yeah, we'll get into it a little bit more in depth a little bit later. But thank you guys for having me, and I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you so much, Kia. And just to introduce the topic of this session, so Kia and I are here to have a conversation about the reproductive health needs of youth who are experiencing commercial sexual exploitation and who are also expecting or parenting from our firsthand and direct service experience. And while that connection may seem obvious, a young person is experiencing sexual exploitation who is also expecting and parenting has very specific needs that need to be discussed explicitly. And so again, we'll be sharing some of our personal experiences, so please do take care of yourself as we're moving through this presentation. And the way we're gonna do this is that I'm basically gonna ask a prompting question, and Kia's gonna have the opportunity to share her knowledge and her experience with you first, and then I'll jump in when necessary. So I think we can go ahead and get started. So the first question is, Kia, can you share a little bit about your experiences of becoming pregnant?
So when I became pregnant, I was actually out of the game. And for those of y'all who don't know what the game is, that is just what we call human trafficking. So when I got pregnant, I was actually like in a real relationship. I had a boyfriend that I was dating. His mom actually let me move into their home because my mom was making me go to like different shelters and different housing units. So as a result of me staying in the room with my boyfriend, my ex-boyfriend, I got pregnant. And so yeah, I was completely out of the game, and people thought I was in the game, but I wasn't. So that's a very common misconception that people think that once you are classified as human trafficking, people think that every boyfriend or relationship that you're in is automatically a human trafficking situation, and that was not the case. That was a legit boyfriend, same age, everything. Yeah.
Thanks, Kia, for sharing. And I really appreciate you highlighting that misconception. I think another thing is that people assume that any children that you've had or any pregnancies that have resulted are the results of exploitation if you have been identified of that, and that's just simply not the case every time. Of course it happens, but it's not the case. Like, for example, I became pregnant really, really, really young. Like, I was still a child. I was 11. And that wasn't the result of exploitation yet. It was a result of sexual abuse. And it kind of prompted me to go into the system because after I had my child, and after, enduring more sexual abuse, I ran away with my son, and the system eventually caught up with me. They found out that I was a child trying to take care of another child, and I didn't have any kind of parental or anybody really taking care of me in that moment. So that's how I entered the foster care system. And so moving on to the next question is, when you found out that you were expecting, were you excited? Can you kind of tell us a little bit about that and whether you were supported in that excitement?
So when I found out, I was actually very excited. The father of the kids was very excited. His family was like crazy excited. They would his mom would go to the ultrasounds. They bought like strollers, car seats, everything. But on the contrary, my family wasn't excited about it. I come from a very stern and you have to live by a certain way type of family. And so with me not having no support on that side of it, it was a lot more pressure on me than it was on his side. So yeah, the support was more like 50-50. I was like split into two.
Thanks, Kia. And can you, you talked a little bit about that excitement, which is also a different perspective because we sort of learn to expect that if you find out that you're pregnant when you're really young, just to expect fear or, wanting to not have, to continue that pregnancy. And it's not always the case as well. Can you share a little bit of what, some of the challenges you face that you think people around you could have supported you better in overcoming?
Absolutely. I was one of those people who was pressured into abortion. And I was really, like you said, I was really excited about having kids. And it is true, they do make it fearful that you're a kid, you can't take care of a kid, there's no tools out there. And I didn't know about like reproductive health care. I didn't know about transitional living programs. I was just out there just trying to make do with what I had. And so a lot of that was about me being a kid making adult decisions. So I could have been supported more, but by the time I got supported, I was already an adult in my head. I was already doing everything that I was supposed to do. If I would have went back in time, what would support look like? Of course, my mom being there for me, and holding my hand through all of these things. Or if she wasn't gonna be there, having access to resources that were gonna be there for me and help me get through it. Because I didn't know that there was programs for people who were teen parents or things like that that would support you with prenatal care and things. I didn't learn about prenatal care till I was in juvenile hall. And like by then it was like the pressure on myself as a child trying to just wiggle and maneuver through the system. It was just already so much. So is it just, if I had any resource, would have been a better resource, to be honest.
Thanks, Kia. I think that I definitely relate to some of the things that you touched on, especially that idea of like adultification, like just expecting young people who are expecting or parenting to just become adults overnight, and it's like the reality is that that's not how it happens. Like we still need a lot of support and we still need guidance and healing and learning how to be a parent, especially when we don't always have that example of what healthy parent to child relationships look like. For example, I experienced, homelessness, like I lived with a relative, I was in the foster home, all while trying to like take care of my baby. And still like in the foster home expected to kind of make those very difficult adult decisions when I myself just needed nurturing, And so like I found that very hard to balance, like being a parent to this child while also like me in my teenage years. Like I remember when I was 16, I was like just screaming for help. Like I just need someone to like love me and hold me and support me. So I think that was definitely a huge factor for me. And actually, like I have, my son is 13 now, and I have an 11-month baby girl, and my parenting is just completely different. I wouldn't say that my parenting was, abusive in any way, but it was just different because I'm not having to parent myself anymore, because I'm actually an adult now. And so, Kia, transitioning to another question, can you talk a little bit about what your experience was when accessing or trying to access reproductive health care, including accessing birth control, checkups, prenatal or postnatal care?
So I kind of touched on that a little bit before, but prior to me getting pregnant, I didn't really know anything about that, like getting help with reproductive care, birth control. All I knew about was like condoms, because they teach you that in like 8th grade in sex ed. They don't really go into depth. And they do talk about contraceptive, but as a kid, you don't really care. It's just like in one ear and out the other. So I didn't really know what was going on with that. But I was sexually active. And so while I was pregnant, I would say the first time that I actually got real reproductive health care was when I was in juvenile hall. And at that time, it was like I was getting the food that I needed. They had a doctor there. I had a bed. I had a roof over my head. I had a shower. Like it sounds crazy that juvenile hall would be a place of sanctuary. But I found comfort there because at least I knew I was going to be okay for that night. And I wasn't a kid scrambling around trying to figure out where my next meal was coming from or where I was going to lay my head the next night. And then, I mean, like after care, after the abortion happened and everything, that's when I felt like people wanted to educate me tremendously. I mean, every person who knew about what was going on was like on me, like this is Depo, this is what pills do, like this is the Implanon, like to insert it inside. Like it was just so much. It was overwhelming with information, like things that I couldn't like learn probably before. If I had the right support system or the right people around me to educate me about it.
Yeah, that definitely speaks to me. I mean, and it's really interesting to hear that, you know, while you were basically incarcerated, that's the most supportive place for you, because it definitely speaks to like how much more we need to do to support young people wherever it is that they are. I mean, and for me, it was a similar experience. Like I didn't receive prenatal care. I was like pregnant at 11, so I was really in denial of like what is happening to my body. My parents never talked to me about sex or anything really that had to do with that, so I was in deep denial. And my parent, like I received prenatal care maybe a week before my son was born, actually, because my mom was my trafficker, actually. And so it was really difficult to kind of come to terms with that. And I remember just being in that space of like the doctor confirming like, yes, you are pregnant and you are very pregnant, you know? And so like just standing there and like not knowing what to do, and doctor asking me like, were you sexually abused? And I couldn't say anything because the perpetrator of that abuse was there. So that's, I think, one of the key things to take away from that is like, how are we reaching to the young people when we're trying to identify young folks who are experiencing exploitation, because unfortunately, familial trafficking does happen. And Kia, did you how so you already talked a little bit about this, but just generally as a youth going through, you know, exploitation, how did that impact how you sought out and access reproductive health care?
I didn't. If that's for lack of better terms, I did not want to outsource or look for any type of medical help in any way, shape, or form. Anybody related to the medical industry was the feds to me, to just keep, for lack of better terms. The questions were invasive. The doctors, they were not trauma informed. One, you touched on it earlier, not really understanding what's happening to the body. Being somebody who was in a human trafficking situation is it's like you kind of in pain all the time, and a lot of the times like that emotional pain overrides any type of physical pain that you will ever go through. And so when you are in some type of physical pain, let's say you need a pelvic exam, or your abuser beat you up and you need to go to the doctor for whatever reason, a lot of the times you'll throw that out the window, because it's like you numb yourself. You numb yourself to whatever is going on. If you itching down there or something like that, you're gonna ignore that itch because you have something else to do, or something that might be a little bit more priority than maybe going to go see a doctor. That's not the first thing on somebody who has been trafficked's mind. A lot of the times you are worried about survival, not how you about to have another bill in the doctor's office, especially if you don't have no type of medical insurance. And then just as a kid, you had to ask for, you have to have your consent from your parents to do a lot of things. I didn't have a parent right there. So who was going to sign for me to do anything? Who's going to sign for x-rays? Who's going to sign for me to get on birth control? Because you need that. And so it was, and even being in foster care, you need your social worker to sign off on things like that. So it's still a hassle. Like it is not an easy access point. Now they're starting to create that, but you still need those consent forms signed. You still need a lot. You still are having invasive questions being asked. You still are, kids don't have the permission to say whether or not a doctor could come in on them or not, or if it's a male or a female or whatever, we don't have a say in that. And so, yeah, a lot of the times it's like, that's not your first priority, to be honest. Yeah, sorry.
No need to apologize. Thank you so much for sharing your experiences with us. Yeah, I mean, I relate to a lot of the things that you just shared, and I feel like one of the hindrances of my accessing just reproductive health care has always been that, prior to exploitation, I didn't feel supported in disclosing what was happening to me, because then what would have happened? Would they have called my mom? My mom already knew what was happening and she just let it happen. I had nobody else. If for example, there were several instances that could have intervened and shortened the time that I was being groomed and being sexually abused. At school, people noticed that I was pregnant, and they frequently pulled me aside and were like, "Hey, are you pregnant?" And of course, I'm not going to be like, "Yeah, I am 11 years old and I'm pregnant," right? And so they just let that keep happening. Or in the hospital, when my son was finally born, because I was under the age of 14, my son was born in Nevada, Las Vegas, for reference. The rule, I guess, is that they have to call the police to investigate when you're under the age of 14. And I was in the hospital for a week and the police never showed up. And so that week that I was in the hospital was the most peaceful week I had ever had in a very long time. The nurses were attentive, taking care of my baby. I was resting. I felt like I could live there forever, The hospital food was still shitty, but that was the least of my worries at that moment. And so I was in heaven. And then, of course, my mom showed up and said, "Okay, you've been released. It's time to go home." And then the abuse continues. And then that escalates to actually being trafficked. And I know we're sharing a lot, so I just wanted to reiterate again, please do what you need to do to take care of yourself. So Kia, how would you like doctors to talk about, or how to create a comfortable environment to have those difficult conversations and for you to feel more comfortable to seek reproductive health care?
So, yeah, the future. How would I see the future? I just say really respecting people as people. I think people need to have that time to disclose when they feel comfortable. Because a lot of the times when you walk in, they got a questionnaire and you get marked off of a checklist. And the problem with being marked off of this checklist is, because I was labeled a C-sec youth and pregnant, I was automatically considered a troubled teen, which it stopped me from being placed at a good foster home where I wanted to graduate high school and do all the right things and go on with life in a transitional house. Instead, I was being placed in very chaotic group homes that had pet teams being called and all type of just crazy. I remember a fire extinguisher being thrown through the door. It was craziness for a kid being pregnant in that type of situation. And I was just automatically labeled. And then being placed in juvenile hall while being pregnant, and having a record. I seen somebody posted in the chat, was my record because of human trafficking? No, it was not. My mother actually put me in juvenile hall, which makes this 10 times even worse. But because I had a juvenile hall record now, because of that, I was like even further like checked off of these boxes. Like nobody said, oh, Kia will be in school 10 years from now. Kia will be in school for electrical engineering. 10 years from now, Kia will be running a nonprofit and a program director. Nobody said these things. Kia will be looking into being a politician. Nobody said this. 10 years ago, I was just a C-sec youth who was trafficked with a baby in her belly, like just trying to figure it out. And everybody just wanted me to check off these boxes, get their numbers and things like that. So like doctors have to be ready for whatever they about to get into. Because it might go down. You might hear some stuff when you're dealing with some human trafficking victims. You might hear some real things, but let them say it when they're ready. Let them come out when they're ready. Let them talk to you, because they will. And the instant you become invasive, we start to shut down. We get into fight or flight mode. We don't trust you. We're ready to go. And just kind of just creating that awareness. Body language is a big thing. If you see somebody not making eye contact, or if you see somebody talking about their past and like not maybe being specific, but you can tell that it's getting them down, refer them to therapy. You don't need to know the details, and it's okay to not know the details. It's okay to not be nosy and pry. I think it's okay to be empathetic, not sympathy, because don't nobody want no handouts or you feeling sorry for them, but just being empathetic, showing that you genuinely care for the person that they are. And then, yeah, it don't cost nothing to be, to care for people. Like I feel like I always say that it don't cost nothing to have integrity. It don't cost nothing to have morals and values, and just do the right thing when nobody is watching. If you don't want nobody to know your personal business like that, don't ask nobody else that. Like you don't want nobody asking your child or your daughter, what are they doing, or this and this and that. Like, so just kind of like being respectful of the people that you're dealing with, the trauma that they've been through. Take courses. There, you can never learn too much. Go educate yourself, read a book. Reading is fundamental. And then creating these conversations like this. This is an important conversation that needs to happen way more often than what is happening. You know what I mean? So creating that platforms, doctors, it's okay to reach out to a survivor or advocate in your community and say, hey, I need your help. I don't know what to do, because nobody knows it all. You know what I mean? So yeah, that's my ramble.
Thanks, Kia. Yeah, I mean, I have the only things to add are I love that you mentioned, showing up with empathy, to talk with the people doctors are seeing, and the other thing too is that you need to I think the priority here for any provider that comes into contact with a survivor is to create that relationship, because if you prioritize creating that relationship with them, the odds are they're going to come back to you and eventually they'll feel comfortable enough to talk about their experience. If you try to, like Kia said, be nosy at the first go, that person is going to be like, nah, I'm not coming back here. Like, I'm not ready to talk about this. Like, I'm just like, this is not where I want to go. Like, I didn't even come here for that. I just wanted you to give me some goddamn birth control, Like, that's what I'm here. And all of a sudden you wanted to know all these things about me. And when young people do disclose that they're, experiencing this, have a plan on what to do next. Know your community organizations that you can refer them to. Like, because, just naming that, especially for a young person to name what's happening to them the first time, like, it has a lot of shame and it has a lot of, emotions that come with it. Because not only, and they might not even say I'm a victim of exploitation, they might say things like, oh, I'm, and this is not my language, but this is language that I've heard you say, like, oh, I'm a prostitute, or I'm just out on the streets, or I'm, whatever. Like, and of course, there's no such thing as a child prostitute, so doctors should know that. But that's how the young person may come to them. I mean, the other thing too, that's, I think is very simple, is just doctors and nurses asking for consent to touch a person, generally, but especially a young person. You don't want to, come in like saying, hey, so-and-so, like, put this gown on and lay down, and all of a sudden, you're being touched everywhere. Like if I like, for example, for someone who's experienced this type of trauma, like it's not even gonna come in my head that I could say no. So whatever doctor tells me to do, I'm either gonna flip out and leave, or I'm just gonna go with the flow, and then I'm gonna be left raw and open, which has actually happened to me, just laying there feeling like I've just been sexually abused again, because the trauma is so intense that you're just going to go back to that place of like, I have no choice but to do this, and it's going to be re-traumatizing, and I'm never going to come back to this doctor, so that's kind of where I wanted to touch on. And like Kia said, like it doesn't, like, just treat people with empathy. Like I think that's one of the key things here. Anything else you want to share, Kia, about this?
No, I'm good. I think we covered everything.
Okay, perfect. I mean, I guess we could jump into the questions. So let's see where you, let's see.
Maria, I've been looking at the chat. Do you want me to read a couple questions?
Oh, yes, please.
Okay. A few people have asked a version of kind of what can they do. So for example, did your social services team ever connect you with mental health services? If so, how was that experience? What feedback would you give a clinician who provides services to survivors of CSEC? You were just touching on that in kind of the medical sphere, but we've had someone, a mental health clinician and also a public health nurse, ask those questions. So maybe you can speak to that a bit.
Okay. Kia, do you want to go first, or you want me to go ahead? I think she said go ahead. Okay, so I think my experience is slightly different because I was never actually labeled as CSEC when I was in foster care. So that's another thing that it is important for people to know, is that just because you don't like check the boxes, like doesn't mean that it isn't happening. And identifying familial trafficking, which is what happened to me, is even more difficult to identify, and you can, think about why that is. I was offered therapy because of the sexual abuse. It was really hard for me to connect with any therapist because just to be blunt, like a lot of the therapists I went to, like would ask me to tell them part of my story. I tell them, some of them would like just be like, oh my God, and like respond in a not very empathetic way. It was more like, what the hell did you just tell me? And that wasn't helpful for me. A lot of the therapists I went to were also white, and I had a really hard time connecting with white women. I mean, to be honest, I still do with the therapist. The times that I did find someone to connect with, like, it was limited. So it was like for a few months, and then that relationship was disrupted. And then I was left with like, well, why should I keep going to therapy if this is going to continue happening? Like, because you have to remember that young people that have experienced this, like, have had such a rupture in like their ability to trust and to build those relationships, that every time a relationship is broken, for whatever reason, it's another reason to not create another one, because it takes a lot of effort, a lot of healing, a lot of trauma to be able to do that. And again, like, don't touch people if you don't need to. Like, I've had therapists come up to me and want to give me hugs, like, just randomly. Don't do that. Like, those are just like some of the simpler ways, but Kia, feel free if you want to add anything to that.
Yeah, definitely agree with everything Maria was saying. When it comes down to therapy, I actually started doing therapy very, very young. So I had a lengthy experience with therapy. But the thing is, once I got the CSEC label on me, it made therapy a lot harder. One, therapists were afraid to like touch my case because of the amount of trauma that I had been through, coming from childhood trauma and in the family and transitioning over to human trafficking. So they kind of were like, I feel like a lot of people were afraid to just kind of touch my case. And then the ones that did get ballsy and wanted to help, it was definitely a barrier. I remember having one therapist, she was white in the beginning, we had excuse me, we had a disconnect, but we ended up like working out, and she was probably one of my better therapists. But the turnover rate to have her was so quick. Like, I only had her for maybe 4 or 5 months, and that was the best therapist I've ever had, but when you in situations like that, like Maria was saying, you don't get to keep them for a long period of time, that will actually make an impact. Then I had a guy therapist who thought it was cool to give me packets to read. And I got like a little form of ADHD a little bit. So me sitting down reading a packet on human trafficking was not what I wanted to do. And so that definitely didn't work out. I even tried like the medication thing, going to see psychiatrists. It's like, once you get that label of CSEC, they automatically want you on medication. They think CSEC is a mental health disorder. That is the most mind-blowing thing to me in the world. CSEC is not a mental disability. I'm sorry. It's trauma that you've been through, but it doesn't define you. But once you get that label on you, they think you need medication. They think that you're not in the right state of mind. You don't get taken seriously. Even when you are talking to a therapist, it's that shock factor, like Maria was talking about, that, oh my God, this happened to you. Oh my God, let me just hug you and cradle you and be your mother or your father or whoever they think that you need at that time. So just kind of just boundaries, respecting boundaries. I think that's what that all summed up to. Like, just respecting everyone's boundaries. You don't want nobody stepping in your 6-foot bubble. Don't step into theirs. And then, like I said, disclosing, letting people disclose when they want to disclose. Asking questions is a lot better than making a statement. Asking clarifying questions. Well, how did this happen? Well, how can I help you here? Or when did this occur? And like, let's elaborate. Would you like to elaborate on that? Would you like to take a break? Teaching clients self-care. Like, human trafficking victims, we don't know that. That is not something that comes second nature to us. So just really taking the holistic approach and targeting the person, like, and not the trauma. You get what I'm saying? Because the person can get out of that trauma. They can cross a bridge where it no longer is a barrier to them. So yeah, that's my.
Can you read another question, May?
Yeah, we got a couple of questions, and you both just started to talk about this, but folks are wondering how you begin to start a conversation if a person is not self-identifying as a victim or, doesn't feel comfortable disclosing what's happening to them.
I think something that I used to do when I was doing direct service, and something that helped me, because I chatted this to someone else privately, but I didn't come to the realization of my victimization. Like, I knew I didn't want, like, I just recognized it as general sexual abuse and didn't know the difference. And there is a huge difference. Like, I came to that realization while doing this work. And so that was kind of a jarring moment of like, I'm like in my master's program and like doing all this research. And I just remember sitting there and being like, holy shit, like, I was a victim of this. Like, nobody even told me. I didn't even know that this was something that had a name, that had a label. Sometimes I wonder if that was a good thing or not, because I had access to other things, and I know that because of the label, some young people don't have access to a lot of things. So, we're never going to know that. But now I just forgot the question, May. Oh, how to begin having those conversations. Yeah. Sorry, got sidetracked, everyone. One of the strategies I used is talking to the youth, like, in hypotheticals. So, like, for example, using that harm reduction approach of, hey, like, if you find yourself in this situation, like, I want you to know that your safety is my priority. I am here for you. I want you to know that I'm here for you. And if you find yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in, you can always call me. That's it. Or let's say, a person asks you to do something that you don't want to do, and you're feeling like you got to do it, because I think that messes up with your brain too, when you got to do something that if you don't do, you can be in danger. I just want you to know that you did what you had to do to survive that moment, and there is absolutely nothing wrong with you. And if you need to talk about it or you need a resource for it, you can always call me, and you don't have to specify what happened. All you got to do is tell me that you need help and what help you need. So like using those hypotheticals of like, I know this is happening to this young person, but not naming it and not saying like, hey, like, I know that you're doing this, this, and that. It's more like taking the route of like, I'm here for you. Like, I want you to be okay, and I want you to be as safe as you can be right now. So using a very harm reduction approach. Kia, would you like to add anything?
Yeah, you over here hitting the nail on the head, girl. Yes. I couldn't say I couldn't say it any better. That showing that you're there by somebody's side means more than any service that you can ever provide for anybody. A human trafficking victim, a human being, just in general, needs a support system, needs somebody that'll say, I got your back no matter what. That's huge. It makes a big difference. I remember having my first case manager that was like, I got you, like no matter what, I got you. And I mean, I gave this lady hell. I was cussing at her, throwing stuff. I mean, getting arrested. Like I was just acting out just because I wanted to see if she was really gonna rock with me, and she did. And from that, it made me want to be better. It made me want to try harder and see what this corporate world was really like, you know. And it's not even a bad threshold, you know. So it's just like you just that support, I can't emphasize enough, like the value of not what you say but how you say it, and just making sure that you're available to support them. That I'm here whenever you're ready makes a huge difference, because we might not be ready that day, we might not be ready that week or that month or that year, but guess what? We're gonna remember 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 years down the line that you're gonna be there, and we will call, and we will, when it's our time, we're gonna be able, and we're gonna be an open book and ready to just, spill it out to you. And we'll always take in mind that you are like, hey, whenever you're ready, I'm there. You know what I mean? So it makes a big difference. Thank you for sharing that.
Any other questions?
Yeah, there are a bunch of questions in the chat. I'm kind of focusing on some of the ones that are more kind of professional specific rather than individual experience specific, since I think that'll be more relevant to everybody. We have a question from Jean from Nickel. Hey, Jean. This is a tricky one that has some legal implications. So if you need to pass, go for it. But how do you deal with the requirement of mandated reporting when you're trying to get a youth to open up about things that might result in their removal from their home or removal of their child? I think that's a really interesting and challenging position that folks find themselves in.
So I think that is an excellent question, and I don't have the answer other than what I've experienced. Being very clear on the law in a way that the youth can understand. So for example, you're in a session, you explain to them like, we're like, I recognize that we're building this relationship. I don't expect you to share everything with me right now or ever, but my duty is to help you heal, and you telling me some of this may help, but I'm not gonna pressure you to do that. There are some rules that I have to abide by, and this is what could happen if you disclose these things. So for example, when I was being a youth advocate, like if I felt in any way that like what the youth was gonna, disclose could result in their removal from their home, like I would actually ask them like, or I would say to them like, do you want to leave your home? Do you believe that there's a safer place for you to be right now? Instead of having them disclose. If you are ready to do that, I can help you do that if you're ready to tell me. If they're a parent, then I would say like, if you disclose something, specifically about your care for your child, like this could happen. Like just being very, very clear about the rules and about the consequences of what the young person's going to share. And more often than not, they'll either stop sharing and save it for another day, or I've actually had a youth tell me, like, I don't want to be here anymore. I think being in foster care is better than being in my house. Like, this is what happened. Can you help me make a report and call CPS because I need them to pick me up? Otherwise, I don't think I'm going to survive. That's all you can really do, I think. Kia, anything to add?
Yeah, I'm gonna double down on everything that you just said because you always hitting the nail on the head each time. But just really making sure you're not manipulating a client into getting information just because you nosy. Like, chill. It's okay if you don't get that information right away. You don't wanna pry things out of people. Like, that is just not a healthy relationship in any way, shape, or form. But just kind of not making sure, like Maria said, you're being very clear up front. Hey, do you have any questions about what I said? Sometimes for kids, you have to reiterate it. So you have to keep telling them, like, reminders, like, hey, I'm a mandated reporter, because they might forget, or they might be in a situation where it's a lot of things going on, so they might need a little reminder, or parents even need some reminders, like, hey, I'm a mandated reporter, watch what you say, you know what I mean? So just kind of being mindful of that, and like I said, don't try to manipulate people. So, like, don't be like, oh, I'm a mandated reporter, and then like try to twist some stuff up over here, and then, you know, doing some all type of crazy stuff that happened while I've been in the system. So just being mindful of like what you're saying, being clear, being upfront, being honest, and letting them know the full picture.
Yeah, thank you. We have a minute left. So as I put in the chat, if we didn't answer any questions, feel free to email me. If I don't feel comfortable, or we don't feel comfortable answering the questions, I will let you know that I don't feel comfortable. I have no problem telling you that I don't feel comfortable answering something. But again, I just want to thank you all for coming into this space and for being, you know, here with us and asking all of these great questions. We both, I think I can speak from Kia, that we hope that you found this session informative, and then we just want to close out by saying that this is just a very small piece of everything that could be discussed in on this topic. And one thing that is often not included in the conversation of youth who are parenting and expecting is that, you know, there's oftentimes a partner or another parent involved in that, and especially you know, male youth. So keep that in mind for future discussions and future research.